Welcome to the very first podcast series of Senate 2021. So, I'm Karthik Thakur from the corporate interface team of SIBM Pune, and we're launching this podcast series for Senate 2021, which is on the theme of scaling sustainability from principles to practice. Let's talk all about sustainability, not just from the environmental point of view, but from the all aspects of being sustainable in our business practices, are sustainable in our supply chains, being sustainable in our business perspectives, like from the marketing point of view, or being sustainable from the operations point of view, for building a sustainable, resilient, and faster supply chain. For the very first podcast episode, we have Mr. Pawan Lal, and we are very excited to have him here. Mr. Pawan Lal is the associate editor at Business Standard, where he writes about the automotive sector, private equity, real estate, FMCG, conglomerates, and many more. He's a winner of the City Journalistic Excellence Award, which he received in 2016. And he's a commendable author of two hard-hitting books, Flawed, The Rise and Fall of India's Diamond Mogul, Nirav Modi, and the second one, Yes Man, The Untold Story of Rana Kapoor, which was published recently on December last year. Mr. Lal was born in Kolkata, raised in Texas, and presently living in Mumbai. He has also written for Fortune India, Telegraph, Bloomberg TV, and Dallas Business Journal. So very excited to have you here on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here as well.
So after covering various sectors throughout your illustrious career, how would you rate the willingness of corporates to make business sustainability a part of their charter and every business strategy?
So, I think CSR or sustainability or looking at charitable ways to contribute to society has been something that has always been part of the corporate agenda ever since I've covered it. It's always been there in the background, and it's something that all companies have been looking at and have been aware of. But I think in recent years, especially with specific regard to your question, if you look at how in India, especially when you have a CSR requirement, you have to give 2% of your profit towards social causes. That's been taken more seriously in the last decade, especially. And you start to see large listed companies and large conglomerates dedicating and allocating more and more resources towards causes that essentially benefit, your triple bottom line with the people, planet, and the environment. And that's something that is picking up speed. The mode and the medium of how those efforts in terms of making businesses and therefore the whole environment around you sustainable has obviously changed. Earlier, it would be anything ranging from giving people food in certain backward underserved areas of India, to then progressing to giving them computers and helping them get more internet literate, to now perhaps scaling to a different level and making them more savvy with digital commerce and new ways of doing business on the internet. So I think the modes and mediums have changed in the last decade, from what I can tell. The intent perhaps has always been there, but has changed shape.
We did a brief about your books. In your books, be it the Yes Man and Flawed, one realizes the importance of how a sustainable business model and a management that fosters the same rather than exploiting it. So what is your take on the thought process that profitability and sustainability cannot coexist?
No, I think they can coexist, but I think it depends on what conditions and at what cost you're chasing them. You can't be chasing profit at the cost of the sustainability of the company, which is what both of these companies arguably did. Definitely Yes Bank was doing. I mean, they were chasing higher top line, higher revenues, higher margins, higher stock prices, growth every quarter. And it worked for a while. For 5 or 7 years, it worked. But it was being done on the back of questionable practices. It was being done on the back of norms that clearly they were, violation of RBI and other regulatory structures. So, at the end of the day, it's very clear the fact that these two companies, both Yes Bank and Nirav Modi's Five-Star Diamonds, are today in, Five-Star Diamonds is all but shut down, and Yes Bank is in terrible shape compared to what it used to be, say, 10 years ago. That itself is evidence that you can't run companies badly and expect them to sustain. You cannot be using the wrong management practices and business principles that are not sound and have to win at any cost and expect the business to survive. No, it's not going to happen. Those days are gone. You have to do the right thing. That doesn't mean that you have to lose, and that doesn't mean you have to not grow. You can do it if you do it the right way. And there are many examples of that. Take Kotak Bank just as an example, right? I mean, Kotak
Yes.
Bank has grown very slowly and steadily over the last 2 decades. It's now one of the largest banks in the country. Yes Bank was actually headed in the same direction. All they had to do was just, stay like the steady tortoise and, stay on track, and they didn't. And that's effectively what caused them to slip and fall. So I think, the premise that you're talking about, which is, can profit exist with sustainability? Of course it can. The question, I think, what doesn't exist in balance with sustainability is profit at any cost mindset. And I think that's something that most corporates and leaders need to be wary about.
So this is something that our listeners are definitely going to take home today. Profit at any cost, that is something that cannot exist with sustainability. So going on to the next question. You have rich experience in the media industry as MBA students here. We wanted to understand how sustainability is practiced in the media and communication sector, and how will the principle of environment, social, and governance can be, or is it like, if it is being applied, how is it being applied according to you in the media and communication sector?
So I think, very clearly ESG and sustainability is something that needs to be practiced by everybody, right? And I think one way that the media clearly has started practicing it is by covering it. You see greater reportage dedicated to climate change, to society, to governance, to corporate governance. You see that much more today. I think in the last few days, there's been a major cold front and ice storm in Texas and other parts of the United States, Ohio, et cetera, et cetera. I think I was talking to friends. I'm originally from Texas when I was going there for college, and my friends were telling me that it's like minus 40 degrees and minus 50 degrees, and there's like 70 degrees changes in weather expected within a week. That is not normal. That is happening because of climate change. That's happening because of massive industrial activity, because of global warming, because of the rise of greenhouse gases. And all of those things are effectively contributing to the sudden shifts in temperature and our conditions, which are just throwing people off balance. As a media company, you really can't do very much in terms of recycling or waste management. Say, for example, if you're a digital media house, what are you going to recycle, right? I mean, if you're a television channel, you really don't have very much beyond a few pieces of electronic equipment. But what you can do is obviously absorb the sound management ethics and the principles that we talked about earlier that apply to any bank or any other corporation, as well as dedicating enough time and effort to covering these topics and making sure the spotlight is shined in areas which needs coverage. I am a contributing editor to Business Standard. I also write for Money Control. I also write for Fortune magazine. And what I would say is that the sustainable model going ahead is going to be a combination of 2 or 3 different facets. I mean, you clearly have to go digital in order to reach a large swatch of people, which include millennials and younger generation citizens. You also have to maintain a physical presence to a certain extent, because believe it or not, as a journalist today, I write about myriad topics, and one of the constant questions that I'm getting every time I cover a certain company or I interview a certain CEO is, this is the question. They ask, well, will this go in print as well? And there's something about that. People like to hold and touch and feel paper, especially when they're being written about. They like to see the physical product. Yes, you do have a greater, shotgun ability to push news out and just go viral and, break the internet and drop news online very, very quickly when it comes to the digital format. But that's something that is also very transient and is not necessarily something that's going to stay forever. It can be easily deleted, it can be modified. And to a large extent, I even notice how courts and our legal systems, they give a lot of credibility and weightage to something that is printed. So I think you're going to see a combination of models evolve. The companies that are going to be sustainable and leaping ahead into the future will have to adapt both those models. I mean, if you're looking after your people and the environment and staying focused on your bottom line, it's good for everything around you. Let me give you a very simple example. If you have, as a corporation, a very strong focus on the health of your employees, and you have a strong work-life balance, you have an environment that allows them to exercise, and maybe you're a large company with gyms and regular healthcare checkups. What does that translate to? That translates to a workforce that is going to be genuinely healthy, perhaps very motivated to come to office regularly, and therefore they're going to be very productive. I think that is probably a best case scenario. If you look at number of leading companies worldwide, they have all these facilities that I talk about. We're starting to see that slowly, very slowly happen in India and some of our bigger cities, where large companies are also becoming conscious about the fact that their employees need to be both physically and mentally healthy if they are to perform the very best. I hope it picks up even more because there's a lot of ground to cover if we are to reach international standards, but it's happening. I think the other factor is that you cannot not be bothered about your environment anymore. If you're a large company in Delhi or Aurangabad or in Pune or Chennai, and you're not concerned about the waste outside your road, outside your company, and what is the old anagram of, a NIMBY, not in my backyard, I don't care about it. That doesn't work anymore. You have to care about what's not in your backyard because it affects you. If you're not going to be interested in how your roads and your highways and your gardens and your trees in your city are working, that's something that's going to impact your drive back to your office. It's going to impact how your residents come together to your local business community. And I think those kinds of things really need a lot of attention in a country like India, which is de facto a very old and a very historical nation that has to evolve much faster in order to meet the standards and the requirements of young Indians as we move through the ages.
Got it. So towards the end, I will just your book was just released in December itself, 2 months ago. Would you like to talk about your book itself?
Yeah, sure. I'll just give you a quick synopsis. Basically, I wrote about Yes Bank, and the book is called Yes Man, the untold story of Rana Kapoor, who was a very ambitious and very dynamic banker here in Mumbai, who basically jumped in and took charge of an idea that was actually started by two other bankers. And he then took that bank and he grew it at any cost and used the whole principle of profit and growth at any cost, and pushed the envelope on all levels. And as we now found out, has essentially and allegedly been using fraudulent systems and funding methods to grow the loan book and make his profits and make his revenues look bigger. And there's a whole host of incongruencies in terms of the way the bank was being run, which led it to collapse in the last 2 years, in the last 3 years actually, once the asset quality review came out thanks to the RBI. And then consequently, you watch and see how there's a downhill decline. So that's what I basically researched and I started writing about. But it's interesting that the story of Rana Kapoor actually becomes more pronounced because if you look back, it was actually the diamond jeweler Nirav Modi who hit the bank the hardest. And I'm talking not just Yes Bank, but basically Punjab National Bank. So if you look at the banking system, the bigger hit came from the diamond industry and Nirav Modi. It was the first time you had seen a company out and out execute a fraud like that, where basically you use documents to take money out from a company, pretend to be doing business, and then siphon it out and push it to other shell companies across the world. And that sent a bit of a shock tremor throughout the system. And then, of course, that was followed by IL&FS and a number of other issues with banks. And I think even today, there's been mention of a bank, a PSU or a cooperative bank, that has run into trouble. So this is something that is systemic, and I felt it needed attention and needed to be highlighted, especially if you look at a bank like Yes Bank, where you have people who are shareholders, retail investors, account holders. Some of them are senior, older people who may not be able to recover their money. They don't have time anymore. They don't have 20 years to see a horizon where they can, erode their, essentially gain back the losses they've eroded. So you think about how that works in a country. This is a institution that has been licensed and certified by government bodies, and then it runs out of money, and there's no excuse for that. And I felt that needed to be highlighted and described and written about, and that's really what caused the genesis of the book.
Yeah. So I think the red flags were already up for 2 or 3 years before it actually happened, but I think the government ignored on that part.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of debate about why do we have to wait so late for the system to crack down on those who are breaking the law. Why can't it be working much faster and much better? And I get that question a lot, and I wish there was an easy answer, but there is no easy answer.
I'm sure, sir, this is gonna be a gravitating and thrilling read. And as the previous book that you wrote, I'm sure that the audience of our particular podcast is going to learn a lot more about sustainability and like go home. Like if they even if they're wherever they're listening this on the go, they're gonna go with a lot more enhanced knowledge in this particular field. As we talked about the triple bottom line concept, we talked about sustainability in the media and communication industry, and
Yeah.
also about having sustainability and that making profit at all concept, like profit at all parts of it cannot go together.
Absolutely. And I think just to round off, I think sustainability will become a lifestyle sooner or later.
Thanks a lot for your closing remarks, sir.
Sure.
And thank you a lot for this session as well. I'm pretty sure that we'll be on campus soon and we'll get to host you on the beautiful Hilltop campus as well.
Love that.
Maybe you can write about the campus in your next book as well. Inform your lighter notes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Take care.
And lastly, thank you to all our listeners who tuned in today to listen to us on this road to Senate. As we all know, guys, Senate 2021 is coming on March 7th, where we're seeing industry stalwarts talking from everything sustainability and scaling it from principles to practice. See you there.